You're listening to the Retire Coast podcast, where money, business, and lifestyle come together. Join us each week as we explore smarter financial planning, starting and growing businesses, and building the life you want at every stage, from millennials and Gen X to today's retirees.
Thanks for dropping in and listening to our podcast today. This topic, which is the Retiree's Guide to Launching a Second Act Business, is one that I've talked to many people about and who are very interested in what to do after they decide to retire. When the discussion centers around people that are in their, say, 30s or 40s, they talk about retiring in their 50s or their early 60s. That doesn't always work out for everyone. And if you retire early, then you can do something a little bit different than what we're going to be suggesting here, because you're younger and more physically capable. But for the vast majority of people that retire in their 60s and maybe early 70s, they want to do something other than just sitting on the beach. Now, I can tell you, I have been there and I have done that. It was my full intention to retire early. I did not. I decided to keep running my company. Then I finally sold it and decided at that point not to retire because I needed to make sure that that company was well taken care of. And in fact, it was. So I stayed there for a number of years as an employee of the company that I sold it to and as a manager. When I felt comfortable that everything was taken care of, I decided it was time for me to leave. And then I thought perhaps I would do something. Wasn't exactly sure, but I had started planning the idea of maybe getting back into real estate investing, something that I had done before I sold my business, but I did not have the time or actually the mental capacity with a new startup integrating it into the bigger company to be able to do it. So basically I sold off all of my assets and I did that integration for about 7 years. Then it was time for me to do something else, as I mentioned, and I decided to get back into it, only this time as a real estate agent and ultimately as a broker. So for me, I did my second act. And then factually, I've got a third act I'll talk to you about a little bit later. But I wanted you to listen to this. We put this together as part of an article that's on retirecoast.com that you can read, and there's a lot of good things in that article too that we can't just show you here, obviously, but you should go to retirecoast.com and read the article. But listen to the dialogue that we created here for you. It's fascinating. It actually impressed me using all of the information from the article to create this, and there's some thought-provoking things here for you. Maybe it'll help you make a decision whether this is what you want to do or not. And we've got a lot of articles there that dig deeper into this, and when you decide to do it, then we have a business membership you may be interested in joining, where we can help you with all kinds of tools to help create a business, manage a business, sell a business, everything about business. If it's been done, I've done it over all of the years that I've been around, and I'm just passing all of this on to you. So please stand by here, listen to the dialogue, and then I'll catch up with you at the end. Thank you.
Imagine walking away from a 40-year corporate career, finally starting the business you've always dreamed of, and purposefully ensuring it never grows past a certain size.
Yeah, which is completely counterintuitive, right?
It really is. I mean, in the traditional business world, that's literally considered a failure.
Oh, absolutely. You're supposed to scale, conquer the market, dominate everything.
Exactly. But in the new post-career economy we're diving into today, capping your growth is actually the ultimate blueprint for success.
It completely flips the fundamental premise of entrepreneurship on its head.
Right.
We are so conditioned to view business as this engine for endless expansion. But when you apply the lens of retirement, the metrics for success change entirely.
You optimize for autonomy and cash flow, not market share. And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
It's a fascinating shift in perspective.
It really is. We are redefining what it actually means to step away from your primary career. And our roadmap for this, for you listening today, is a massive ecosystem of resources from retirecoast.com.
Specifically, we're looking at their very detailed guide titled Business After Retirement, 11 Great Ideas for Retirees.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the typical image of retirement involves Golf course.
Yeah.
Maybe a rocking chair on a porch.
Yeah, exactly. Doing absolutely nothing.
Right. But this source suggests forming an LLC and scaling a digital business instead. We aren't just talking about picking up a hobby to pass the time.
No, not at all. We are looking at the specific mechanics of launching a lifestyle business.
A venture structured to provide financial padding and intellectual engagement, but without the crushing stress of a traditional startup.
And to understand why this specific framework carries so much weight, we really have to look at the architect behind it. The author is Bill Anderson.
Right, who is definitely not just some academic theorizing about what seniors might enjoy.
Exactly. He's an Air Force veteran, a real estate broker, and a highly successful investor. Crucially, he built a national business and sold it to a Fortune 200 company.
Which is huge. That's the dream for most entrepreneurs.
It is. So when someone who has successfully navigated the complexities of a Fortune 200 acquisition pivots to writing about micro businesses for retirees, you have to pay attention.
You really do. He understands the mechanics of scale perfectly.
Yeah, and yet he is explicitly advising this demographic to build anti-scale businesses.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. But he's reached an audience of over 1.5 million people because he bridges that gap. He takes high-level business acumen and applies it to the practical, everyday realities of living on a fixed income.
So before we jump into the 11 specific businesses he advocates, and we are going to dissect all 11 of them, we need to establish the ground rules.
Right. The environment is totally different.
It is. Because starting a business at 65 is a fundamentally different sport than starting one at 30.
The foundational difference lies in how we define the word retirement itself. The source explicitly rejects the mid-20th century industrial definition.
The idea that you hit a certain age, get your gold watch, and just permanently cease all economic productivity.
Exactly. Anderson defines retirement as leaving a primary job for a new start.
A new direction entirely.
Right. It's a transition point where you have the agency to choose a new lifestyle. And that very well might include part-time employment or an entrepreneurial venture.
So it's basically the transition from mandatory labor to optional labor.
That's a great way to put it.
But, that brings up the elephant in the room. When you're operating on optional labor, your risk tolerance plummets.
Oh, absolutely. It falls off a cliff.
Right. I know what you're thinking as you listen to this. You're thinking, I just spent 4 decades methodically building my nest egg. I've navigated market crashes, inflation.
And now you want me to risk my capital on a startup right when I don't have the runway to recover from a failure.
Exactly. It sounds incredibly risky on the surface.
And the source addresses that financial fear directly in its FAQ section. The question is, can I really start a business on a retirement income?
And the answer?
The answer is yes, provided you fundamentally alter your capital strategy. You do not touch the nest egg.
So no draining the 401k to buy a warehouse.
Definitely not. The mechanics rely on ultra-lean startups utilizing low-overhead digital tools.
So keeping things as cheap as possible from day one.
Right. The critical rule is that you scale gradually using the business's own generated profits. You do that rather than dipping into your life savings or, taking on heavy commercial debt.
It makes me think of the difference between poker and chess.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, in a traditional mid-career startup, especially if you're taking on venture capital, you're playing high-stakes poker.
You're pushing all your chips into the center of the table.
Right. You're leveraging outside capital to force a win. You're bluffing, and you are accepting the very real possibility of losing your shirt.
Which is terrifying at 65.
Exactly. But a retirement lifestyle business is like a friendly game of chess. You're leveraging your time, your patience, and your existing knowledge to steadily advance your position on the board.
You're deliberately making moves that ensure your king, which is your retirement nest egg, is never put in check.
What's fascinating here is that precise mechanical distinction. In the chess match, you aren't trying to bankrupt the other player.
Right, you're just playing for the intellectual challenge and a bit of extra cash.
Exactly. The text points out that the sweet spot for these businesses exists precisely where your established skills, your personal passions, and your desired lifestyle intersect.
It's a massive shift. You're engineering an environment where you work solely for engagement and autonomy, not survival.
But even in a friendly game of chess, you need to set up your defenses. And for anyone familiar with business structures, The source's immediate recommendation to form an LLC won't come as a surprise.
No, forming a limited liability company is pretty standard advice.
But the stakes of that LLC are completely different here, aren't they?
Absolutely. We all know an LLC provides a legal barrier between the business and the individual.
Right.
But for a 30-year-old entrepreneur, a bankruptcy might just mean a bad credit score for 7 years. They can just start over.
But for a 65-year-old, a business liability could mean losing their primary residence, or having a retirement account garnished if the corporate veil is pierced.
Exactly. If you're starting a handyman business or offering consulting services, establishing an LLC ensures that a dissatisfied client or a workplace accident cannot financially devastate your retirement.
It is the ultimate defensive maneuver. It effectively ring-fences your life's work from your new retirement project.
Right. It keeps the two worlds completely separate.
So, assuming we have our LLC in place and we've committed to this lean, profit-funded growth model, where do we actually start?
Well, the source breaks these 11 ideas down into a few distinct categories.
And the most logical place to begin is by monetizing the assets you already hold, right?
Exactly. Let's look at the brain trust models. Monetizing mental capital is arguably the most resilient path for an older entrepreneur.
Because your physical stamina might wane, but your cognitive assets are at their peak.
Yes. Your decades of specific, hard-won industry knowledge are incredibly valuable.
The first model presented here is consulting or coaching. Now, on the surface, this sounds great. Zero overhead, you just need a laptop and a phone.
It's the ultimate lean startup.
But let me push back a bit here. Let's say I've spent 30 years as a middle manager in corporate logistics. Is a modern, agile tech company really going to hire a retired middle manager to consult?
That's a fair question. How does it work in practice?
Right, it sounds a little too easy.
Well, it works because you aren't selling general management. You are selling hyper-specific crisis avoidance.
Okay, that makes sense.
The text emphasizes that you already possess expertise that people value. In practice, companies don't want to hire a full-time logistics director with a massive salary and benefits package.
Especially if they only have a temporary supply chain bottleneck.
Exactly. They want a fractional expert. They want someone who has seen that exact bottleneck 3 times over the last 4 decades.
Someone who knows the specific sequence of calls to make to clear it out.
Right. You are stepping in, deploying highly concentrated intellectual capital, and stepping out.
So you're basically selling the shortcut. You aren't selling your time. You're selling the fact that you already made all the mistakes on someone else's dime 20 years ago.
That's exactly it. But, consulting still requires active client acquisition and one-on-one time.
True. You still have to hustle to get clients.
Right. So if you want to completely decouple your knowledge from your schedule, the source pivots to the second idea: online education or course creation.
Okay, and the creator economy is massive right now.
Yeah.
But again, a skeptic might look at the landscape of YouTube and online platforms and think it's entirely saturated.
Yeah, people think it's just 22-year-old influencers dancing on TikTok.
Exactly. But the text suggests a totally different approach. It uses this great phrase talking about teaching everything from bookkeeping to coastal cooking.
That phrase perfectly illustrates the micro-niche strategy. If you try to launch a generic course on basic accounting, you will drown in a sea of free content.
Nobody's going to pay for that when they can Google it.
Right. But if you take your 30 years of CPA experience and build a specialized module on bookkeeping compliance for coastal short-term rentals.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's incredibly specific.
You've instantly bypassed the generic competition.
Yep.
You are targeting a highly specific buyer who has a highly specific pain point.
And the economics of that are just fascinating. I mean, you only need a camera and a hosting platform.
Startup costs are basically zero.
Right. The customer acquisition costs might be slightly higher because the niche is so small, but the lifetime value of that digital asset is incredible.
It really is. You record it once, and whether 10 people buy it or 10,000 people buy it, your labor input remains exactly the same.
It is the purest form of scale. But suppose you crave direct human interaction. You want the feedback loop of teaching, but you want to stay rooted in your local community.
Well, that's where the third idea comes in. The text suggests leveraging your academic strengths, like math, English, or science, through high school tutoring.
This stood out to me because it taps into the gig economy, but it reframes it entirely for seniors.
Right. You aren't driving an Uber or delivering takeout.
Exactly. You're capitalizing on educational gaps. The text specifically references a program involving volunteering and working with Southern Mississippi University.
And the mechanics of modern tutoring have evolved so much. It's no longer just putting a flyer on a community center bulletin board and hoping someone calls.
No. Definitely not. There are robust digital platforms that match tutors with students globally.
Yeah, and those platforms handle all the annoying stuff like scheduling and payment processing.
The source notes this pays hourly, is super meaningful, and is completely flexible. You have total control over your availability.
And it delivers a profound sense of purpose. You're actively transferring generational knowledge to kids who really need it.
Which transitions perfectly into the final idea in this knowledge-based quadrant: real estate brokerage or referral business.
This one leverages a totally different kind of knowledge. It's not academic, it is purely relational and geographic.
Real estate is sort of the classic post-retirement pivot, isn't it?
It really is. The text poses this evocative prompt. Want to sell real estate on the beach?
Which sounds pretty great, honestly.
Right. And it highlights that this business is built entirely on the community ties you have forged over decades.
But the barriers to entry here are definitely higher than the others we've discussed.
Yeah, that's true.
You have state licensing exams, continuing education, and the fees for the multiple listing service, the MLS.
You do. But the text justifies those costs through the flexibility of the referral model.
Oh, right. Because you don't actually have to be the one showing the houses.
Exactly. If you don't want to hustle to show houses every weekend, you can maintain an active license simply to act as a referral agent.
So you just use your vast network to connect buyers with active agents.
Yes. And then you take a standard 25% referral fee off the commission. You are literally just monetizing your Rolodex.
That is brilliant. You act as the social routing layer. You know who is downsizing. You know who is moving into town.
And you just connect the nodes and collect a fee.
It's so smart. And when we look at these 4 brain trust models, consulting, courses, tutoring, and real estate, the common denominator is clear.
They completely detach physical exertion from income generation.
Right. They are pure knowledge sharing, which is arguably the most resilient asset an older entrepreneur has.
But, you know, as fulfilling as knowledge work can be, we have to acknowledge that some people want the exact opposite when they retire.
Absolutely. If you have spent 40 years dealing with abstract corporate strategy, endless email chains, and intangible deliverables,
the idea of doing more screen-based work is just repulsive.
Exactly. There is a strong demographic of retirees who actively seek out the local, tangible economy. They want to get out into the neighborhood.
They want to work with their hands and actually see physical evidence of their labor at the end of the day.
And the source leads this category with the handyman business. For someone with trade skills, plumbing, carpentry, general repair, this seems like an obvious fit.
It does. But let's look at the actual market dynamics here. The text uses a very specific subheadline for this section.
Oh, right. It says, "Why seniors need a handyman."
Yeah, it highlights a massive demographic shift. We have an entire generation of homeowners who are aging in place.
They have the capital to maintain their homes, but they no longer have the physical capacity to do it themselves.
Exactly. It's no longer safe for them to climb a ladder to clean gutters or contort themselves under a sink to fix a garbage disposal.
So the retired handyman isn't competing with large construction firms for major renovations.
No, not at all. They are specifically targeting the micro repair market for their own peer group.
It is a highly localized, trust-based microeconomy. A 70-year-old widow is much more likely to trust a retired veteran who lives in her neighborhood.
Absolutely. She'll trust him to fix her door hinge way more than some random contractor she found on the internet.
The demand is completely inelastic. It's always there, driven by local word of mouth.
But as you pointed out earlier with the LLCs, the liability here is physical.
Right. If you are 68 and you fall off a ladder, or you accidentally strike a pipe and flood a kitchen, the consequences are severe.
Which is why the source emphasizes the strict necessity of proper insurance alongside that LLC. You have to factor the cost of comprehensive general liability insurance into your hourly rate.
So you're trading slightly higher overhead for immediate, guaranteed local demand.
Exactly. It's a trade-off.
Okay, I see the economic logic there. But the next idea in this tangible category genuinely gave me pause. A landscaping or lawn mowing business.
I know, it sounds a bit intense for retirement.
Wait, isn't retirement supposed to be relaxing? Why on earth would you take up landscaping in the middle of the summer heat? Let's be brutally honest. The physical toll of running a commercial mower is intense.
It is a totally valid pushback. But the source addresses that directly, and their defense is actually quite profound.
Really? How do they justify it?
They don't frame it as manual labor, they frame it as paid fitness. The text explicitly states landscaping can be cathartic.
cathartic. Mowing lawns.
Yes, think about the psychological deficit of modern white-collar work. You rarely see a project to completion. Everything is just an ongoing process.
That's true. You just move on to the next spreadsheet.
Exactly. But mowing a lawn provides immediate, undeniable visual feedback. You transform chaos into order in exactly 45 minutes.
I guess there is something satisfying about that.
Plus, the text points out that lawns are important to the community, and the work provides light exercise.
So you are getting paid to maintain your cardiovascular health outdoors instead of paying a premium for a gym membership.
Right, and you have total control over your capacity. You aren't trying to build a fleet of landscaping trucks.
You just take on exactly 5 lawns in your immediate neighborhood.
Yeah. You work only in the mornings before the heat peaks, and you shut it down entirely during the off-season.
You cap the scale to protect the lifestyle. That makes a lot of sense.
But if even that level of physical labor is too much, the text offers home-based services.
This includes things like pet sitting, local bookkeeping, or running errands, right?
Yes. The startup cost for those is virtually zero.
The economics of pet sitting and errand running are interesting. There's no overhead, but the real return on investment seems to be social capital.
Exactly. The source heavily emphasizes the social benefit. Isolation is one of the leading drivers of cognitive decline in retirement.
Oh, wow. So staying active is literally a health necessity.
It is. By structuring a business around community service, walking the neighbor's dog, helping someone organize their receipts, you are forcing social collisions.
You are remaining an active, visible participant in the local fabric while generating a steady, low-stress income.
It keeps the retiree engaged and social.
So we have models that leverage the mind and models that leverage the body, but both of those still fundamentally require you to trade your time for money.
Right. If you stop consulting or if you stop mowing lawns, the cash flow starts instantly.
But the true holy grail of the lifestyle business is decoupling your time from your revenue entirely.
This is where we enter the realm of digital assets and passive income engines.
The goal here is to build systems that generate income while you are out enjoying your actual retirement.
Exactly. The first engine the source suggests is an e-commerce store, selling physical or digital products.
They mention platforms like Shopify, Etsy, or Amazon. Now, the logistics of e-commerce can be incredibly complex. Inventory management, shipping, dealing with returns.
It sounds like a nightmare for someone who wants a low-stress life.
Right. How does a retiree navigate that without turning their garage into a stressful warehouse?
They navigate it by utilizing modern supply chain tools like drop shipping or print on demand.
Okay, break that down for me.
In these models, you act purely as the digital storefront and the marketing engine. When a customer buys a product from your Shopify store, the order is automatically routed to a third-party manufacturer.
Oh, so you don't even make the product?
Nope. The third party prints, packs, and ships the item directly to the customer.
So you never actually touched the physical inventory at all. You were just managing the digital margins.
Correct. Here's where it gets really interesting. The text points out that the true value here is location independence.
Oh, absolutely.
You could be managing your Etsy store or your product listings from an RV traveling through the national parks or from a beach chair in Florida.
The business operates entirely in the cloud. That location independence is a massive draw for retirees.
It really is. But what if you want to invest in something more tangible than a digital storefront?
The source brings up vacation or long-term rentals next, turning property into an income stream.
Now, real estate investing is notoriously capital intensive. You have property acquisition, prep, listing fees, and specialized insurance.
Right. The startup costs are definitely moderate to high. What is the argument for taking on that level of overhead in retirement?
The argument is the yield curve and asset appreciation. The text notes that this model delivers both immediate passive income and long-term equity growth.
So unlike a dropshipping store that disappears the moment you stop paying for your website hosting, a piece of real estate is a hard asset.
Yes, it hedges against inflation perfectly.
And as we'll discuss later, the location of that real estate drastically changes the math. Buying a rental property in an oversaturated high-tax market is a headache.
But buying one in an emerging coastal market with high tourism demand is a cash-flowing asset.
Which is why the source cross-links this idea with their broader real estate investment guides. But let's look at the third digital asset, which requires virtually no initial capital: blogging or content creation.
This is a great one. The source suggests creating content around topics like travel, retirement life, or specific hobbies.
And then monetizing that content with display ads, affiliate marketing, or selling digital products. The startup cost is literally just the price of a domain name and basic web hosting.
And what makes this recommendation so authoritative is that we are looking at the proof of concept in real time.
Oh, right, because RetireCoast itself is a perfect example.
Exactly. We can analyze retirecoast.com as a masterclass in the content creation model. Bill Anderson didn't just write a single guide. He built a massive media ecosystem.
The scale is actually staggering. The text notes that the RetireCoast podcast is listened to in 77 countries and 1,394 cities.
That level of asymmetric upside is only possible with zero marginal cost media.
Because whether one person reads his article or 1 million people read it, his cost of production is identical.
Exactly. And look at the thematic spread of their content. They aren't just writing strictly about Roth IRAs or golf.
No, they cover everything. They have an entire historical series preparing for the 250th anniversary of America in 2026.
Right. They're exploring who we were in 1776, looking at the camp followers of the revolution, the weapons used.
They're even writing deep economic pieces, analyzing 50-year mortgage proposals. It really proves that the content model works.
It proves that as a retiree, you don't have to restrict your content to boring senior citizen topics. You can build an audience around history, economics, or regional travel.
You build the audience first with authentic curiosity, and the monetization naturally follows.
It is a brilliant model for someone who loves to research and write. However, we have to acknowledge that building a brand from scratch is highly ambiguous work.
It is. Designing a logo, figuring out SEO, testing marketing channels, it can be overwhelming.
And for some people, ambiguity is the enemy of a peaceful retirement.
That is a crucial point. If you just spent 40 years executing protocols in a highly structured environment, say a massive hospital system, the military, or a Fortune 500 company,
you might be paralyzed by a blank canvas.
Exactly. You don't want to invent the wheel, you just want to drive the car.
And for that specific psychological profile, the source provides what we can call the turnkey option, franchise ownership.
The text mentions buying into proven models like commercial cleaning, specialty coffee, home services, or senior care.
Now, this requires a significant pivot in our financial thinking. Up until now, we've talked about ultra-lean startups.
Right. But franchises require hefty initial franchise fees, mandated equipment purchases, and ongoing royalty payments.
So, a skeptic might ask, why would a retiree seeking a low-stress lifestyle willingly take on that kind of financial friction? Why pay high fees for a franchise when you could start a blog for pennies?
It's because they are purchasing risk mitigation. When you buy a franchise, you are essentially buying a pre-calculated unit economic model.
The franchisor provides a comprehensive standard operating procedure, built-in training and branding.
The text specifically notes that this is ideal for structured retirees.
Structured retirees. That phrase does a lot of heavy lifting.
It really does. If you operated within a chain of command your entire life, the franchise binder is basically your new commanding officer.
You don't have to debate what color the signage should be or how to price the service or what payroll software to use.
Every single variable has been tested and optimized by the corporate parent.
You are paying a premium to eliminate the trial and error phase that dooms most small businesses in their first 3 years.
You are shifting your role from an innovator to an operator. Or, even better, you hire a manager and shift your role entirely to a capital allocator.
You just oversee the metrics while the system runs itself.
Exactly. So we now have a comprehensive view of the 11 business models spanning from pure knowledge work to digital assets to turnkey franchises.
But a business idea is just a hypothesis until you introduce it to the friction of the real world.
Right. And the source dedicates significant space to the execution strategies that make these models viable.
Particularly focusing on the tax code and veteran-specific advantages.
Let's tackle the tax implications first. Because the moment you transition from a W-2 employee to a 1099 contractor or an LLC owner, the tax code suddenly works for you rather than against you.
The text asks, are there tax benefits to running a small business in retirement?
And the answer fundamentally changes the math of your retirement budget.
By operating a legitimate business, you unlock the ability to deduct expenses that you might otherwise be paying for out of pocket.
We're talking about the home office deduction, where a percentage of your rent, utilities, and internet bill becomes a legitimate business expense.
We're talking about vehicle depreciation and mileage tracking if you are driving to job sites.
If you are a travel blogger, aspects of your travel could potentially be deductible. You are effectively lowering your taxable footprint while generating supplementary income.
However, The source includes a vital caveat that we must emphasize. The IRS has very strict rules differentiating a legitimate business from a hobby.
Right, you can't just call your golf habit a business.
Exactly. If your business doesn't show a profit for several years, the IRS might reclassify it as a hobby, wiping out all those deductions.
Therefore, the text explicitly advises always consulting a tax professional to ensure total compliance.
And navigating that compliance can definitely be intimidating. But the source material goes a step further here.
Retire Coast isn't just an informational blog, it's a functional ecosystem. They actually offer business startup services directly through their platform,
Which is incredibly helpful. For a fee, they will secure your business name, file the necessary state paperwork, and draft your operating agreements.
They recognize that the administrative friction of forming the LLC is often the biggest hurdle preventing retirees from taking action.
So they built a service to handle this compliance and remove that bottleneck entirely.
But while the tax advantages apply to everyone, the text outlines a specific, highly accelerated execution path for military veterans.
Given that author Bill Anderson is an Air Force veteran, this section is written with deep personal insider knowledge.
He brings serious personal weight to this section. He understands that veterans possess a unique structural edge in the entrepreneurial space.
Backed by significant federal resources. The source details the infrastructure built by the U.S. Small Business Administration, the SBA, specifically to fast-track veteran success.
And it starts with procurement. The text highlights the Veteran-Owned Small Business, or VOSB, certification.
Let's break down why that certification is basically a golden ticket, particularly in sectors like consulting, logistics, or B2B services.
The federal government, by law, mandates that a certain percentage of its massive contracting budget must be awarded to veteran-owned businesses.
Precisely. If you are a retired military logistics officer who starts a consulting firm and you secure that VOSB certification, you are no longer competing in the brutal open market against massive corporate consulting firms.
You are competing in a much smaller, protected pool for highly lucrative government contracts. It is an incredible structural advantage.
But the support goes far beyond just procurement. The text details the SBA Veterans Business Outreach Centers, the VDOCs.
These centers provide free, localized business training, transition counseling, and mentorship.
You have access to seasoned professionals who can help you translate your military jargon into a civilian business plan.
And when it comes to capitalization, the text points to the Patriot Express loan program and the SBA 7A loans.
These financial instruments often come with waived upfront guarantee fees and more favorable interest rates than standard commercial loans,
which significantly lowers the cost of capital for a veteran launching a franchise or a tangible service business.
So what does this all mean?
It means there is an entire infrastructure designed to fund and support this specific demographic.
Right. We have preferential procurement, free high-level mentorship, and subsidized capital.
But beyond the external support, the source makes a compelling argument about the internal psychology of the veteran.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to ask why veterans categorically succeed at such high rates in these lifestyle businesses.
The text attributes it to the direct translation of military skills to civilian enterprise.
The core competencies honed over 20 years in the armed forces leadership, under pressure, rigorous discipline, absolute adherence to standard operating procedures, and cross-functional teamwork.
Those are the exact competencies required to scale a business profitably. They translate naturally to logistics, construction, consulting, and franchise ownership.
It is a perfect mapping of skills. If you successfully manage the supply chain for a forward operating base, managing the inventory for a local e-commerce dropshipping operation is second nature.
Exactly. The execution strategies utilizing the tax code and leveraging veteran infrastructure provide the how.
But a business doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in time and space.
And the source spends a massive amount of its real estate discussing the when and the where of the new retirement. The business you start is heavily influenced by when you start planning and where you physically live.
Let's look at the timeline first. The text includes a specific guide targeted directly at Generation X.
Right. Gen X retirement planning, a 20-year budget, inflation and income guide.
It is a sobering acknowledgement that the macroeconomic environment has shifted. Generation X is currently looking at about a 20-year runway before traditional retirement age.
And the text insists that the planning for a post-career business must start now because the variables are volatile.
The primary variable being inflation. If you don't accurately project the erosion of your purchasing power over the next 2 decades, you can't accurately size your lifestyle business.
That is the crucial link. The source demands realistic budgeting and inflation planning.
They want you to prepare your legacy to turn uncertainty into a resilient plan so you can define your exact income gap.
If your projected fixed income, your Social Security timing and 401k drawdowns leaves you with a $2,000 monthly shortfall when adjusted for future inflation, that number dictates your business strategy.
It tells you exactly how many hours of consulting you need to book or what the CAC rate needs to be on your rental property.
It changes the business from a vague hope into a precise mathematical tool. You are building the bridge while you are still standing on solid ground.
But the timeline is only half of the equation. The geographical location where you choose to physically plant your flag has the power to radically multiply or destroy the viability of your business.
The source is absolutely obsessed with the concept of geographic arbitrage.
Geographic arbitrage is the financial engine that makes this entire lifestyle business concept sing.
The definition is simple. You earn your money or hold your assets in a strong, high-value economy, but you base your physical life and your operations in a location where the cost of living and the regulatory burden are significantly lower.
And the source leaves zero ambiguity about where it believes the ultimate geographic arbitrage opportunity is right now. It is deeply focused on the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
The ecosystem of content on Retire Coast explicitly compares the economic realities of Mississippi versus Florida versus California.
They publish deep dives analyzing why people are leaving California, pointing to the crushing state income taxes, the exorbitant cost of housing, and the regulatory friction that makes starting a small business incredibly difficult.
And they contrast that with the Gulf Coast. They paint this vivid picture of coastal towns like Ocean Springs and Bay St. Louis.
They talk about the cultural richness, anticipating the Mardi Gras 2026 celebrations.
They highlight local economic drivers like vacationing near the beach with Christie's Gulf Beach Rentals. They aren't just selling a place to retire. They are selling a strategic economic zone.
Let's analyze how that specific geographic location intersects with the business ideas. Take the real estate or vacation rental model.
Right. If you take the equity from the sale of an average home in California, you can outright purchase multiple cash-flowing rental properties on the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Your cost of capital acquisition plummets. While the tourism demand ensures high occupancy rates, it becomes infinitely more viable and profitable.
And it supercharges the local, tangible businesses, too. If you start a handyman or landscaping service in a town like Ocean Springs, you are operating in a market that is actively receiving an influx of wealthy retirees fleeing high-tax states.
You have an endlessly replenishing target market with high disposable income moving into your service area every single month.
The macroeconomic trend is literally subsidizing your microbusiness.
The location provides the ultimate tailwind. Lower taxes mean you keep more of your profits. Lower cost of living means your business doesn't have to generate as much revenue to sustain your lifestyle, keeping your stress levels low.
The geography is the foundation that makes the lifestyle business viable. It is a beautifully integrated system.
You use your 20-year runaway to calculate your exact inflation-adjusted needs. You execute geographic arbitrage by moving to a high-growth, low-cost area like the Gulf Coast.
You wrap yourself in the legal protection of an LLC. And then you deploy your accumulated knowledge or your physical energy or your digital savvy to launch a venture that perfectly balances profit with purpose.
If we synthesize the ultimate thesis of Bill Anderson and the entire Retire Coast ecosystem, it is this. In the modern era, starting a business after you leave your primary career is less about taking on risk and more about freedom.
It is a mechanism to keep you active, purposeful, and socially connected to your community, all while maintaining absolute sovereignty over your own schedule.
Whether that means tutoring students online, fixing plumbing in your new coastal neighborhood, running a Shopify store from an RV, or managing a proven beach rental franchise, the goal remains identical.
You are hunting for that perfect intersection of what you are skilled at, what you actually have a passion for, and your desired lifestyle.
But analyzing this text deeply raises a much larger, almost philosophical thought to end on.
Yeah.
We have spent this entire deep dive looking at the mechanics of building a low-stress, passion-driven business that covers your living expenses while providing total autonomy over your time.
Right. The source presents this as the ultimate reward for surviving a 40-year career. It's the prize at the end of the maze.
But if this model, the lifestyle business, is so economically viable and so deeply fulfilling, providing purpose and flexibility in our 60s and 70s, Why in a world do we culturally agree to wait until retirement to embrace it?
Oh, wow. That is a profound shift in perspective.
What if the ultimate lesson of this text isn't just about how to retire well? What if it is a challenge to younger generations to build these low-stress, passion-driven lifestyle businesses right now?
To effectively live a state of working retirement for the entirety of their adult lives. If the tools exist to build a location-independent business that sustains your life without destroying your mental health, why endure 4 decades of corporate burnout first?
Why wait for the finish line to realize you could have been enjoying the run the entire time? Maybe the trail, the exploration, the autonomy that is the actual destination.
That is something to really mull over. We want to thank you for taking this deep dive with us into the evolving, highly strategic world of post-career entrepreneurship based on the Retire Coast Guides. Keep analyzing your own timeline, keep questioning the accepted map, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.
I hope you found this interesting and that it will lead you to a decision to either go into a second act and create a business, or at least you understand that you have these options to do if you decide to do them later on, and you can find all of the resources necessary to really get that business started, from the ability to use our tools and create a limited liability company, transferring assets, to many other things, going to our business membership, for example. Also, we have an estate planning membership for you, which would be important if you have some assets in that business or personal assets as well. Thank you for coming to Retire Coast. Don't forget to visit retirecoast.com. And then we also have YouTube. I'll see you on the next one. Thank you.